So this video is going to be for my believers. One verse that we really need to stop taking out of context is God is not the author of confusion. Like, there's so many instances of God causing confusion in the Bible. And it comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33. But let's read what Paul says in this letter before that. So he says in verse 26, "How is it then, brethren, when you come together, every one of you hath a psalm, has a doctrine, hath a tongue, hath a revelation, hath an interpretation. Let all things be done unto edifying." So he's questioning them about how they are with order in the church. You guys are all doing everything at the same time. There's really no order. So he's writing this letter to help them. That's why he says, let all things be done unto edifying. It says, if any man speak in an unknown tongue, let it be by two or at the most by three, and that by course, and let one interpret. And if you go to some churches today, what is taught is that if somebody is speaking in tongues, that it can't be translated, which is a lie. All tongues simply just means is language. So when Paul says if any man speaks in an unknown tongue, he just means if somebody is coming in and speaking in a language that the rest of the people don't understand, let somebody who can understand interpret what they're saying. Then he says in verse 28, but if there be no interpreter, let him keep silent in the church, and let him speak to himself and to God. So here it's saying let him keep silence, and nobody can come interpret what he's saying, because that's just a whole bunch of confusion. It doesn't make any sense. And then verse 29, let the prophets speak two or three, and let the others judge. If anything be revealed to another that sits by, let the first hold his peace. For you may all prophesy one by one, that all may learn and all may be comforted. So he's teaching them order, teaching them how to run things. That's the purpose of these letters. He was trying to instruct the Corinthians how people of God are supposed to be. Verse 32, and the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. So that's all it simply means. Let there be order, because God is not the author of confusion in the church. There cannot be 52 people speaking in tongues at the same time, and then we have no idea what those people are saying, and they're just rambling on, and then you have 10 people screaming, jumping up and down, all this confusion. Because then when a non-believer walks in, they're confused. They don't even know what's going on, and they may leave. So churches ought to have order. That's what Paul is saying, that God is not the author of confusion in a church. So if you ever go into a church and you're confused about what's going on, you have somebody doing a backflip here and somebody screaming in tongues, jumping and looking like they're having a demon possession, that is not of God. That's not how God's church is supposed to be ran. God's church is supposed to have order. So that's what that verse means when it says he's not the author of confusion. It's not saying that he can't cause confusion, because an example of this is if you read in Genesis chapter 11, when the people were trying to build the tower to reach to heaven, what did God do? God confounded their languages. What did God say most of the time in the book of Psalms? Or what did David say to God most time in the book of Psalms? He would say, Lord, cause confusion among my enemies, confound my enemies. Because God can cause confusion, but God will not dwell in a church where you don't understand what's going on. That's what Paul was truly trying to say here. And I don't blame anyone for quoting this out of context, because I used to as well until I read the whole thing. And also, if you read Peter's warning, Peter warns that Paul says some things that are hard to understand and can be misinterpreted. But yeah, that's what it means, y'all. Like, don't take this verse out of context, please.